Good evening, friends and partners on Facebook. Good evening, friends and partners. So AfriH, Africans for the Restoration of Ethics in Government. This is your founder and host, Reverend Dr. Aquilus Ricks, coming to you live from our regular feed on Mondays at 8 p.m. Central Time in the United States of America. We are honored this evening to have a special guest with us. As many of you know, AfriH is an organization, a nonpartisan organization that exists to harness the expertise of professional Africans and global partners in the diaspora and on the continent of Africa to discuss issues significant to the well-being of Africa and to her future. And today we are honored, and it's a privilege to have with us Ms. Beverly Yekeson. She was born and raised in Liberia, West Africa. She has a deep passion for environmental and social issues, both here in the US and globally. Ms. Yekeson has a 20-year career, I would say 20-year plus career in different areas of governance and different political sectors that she has served. Most notably, she's led and coordinated the development of the Washington County U.S. Environmental Protection Agency 8-hour ozone early action compact. That's a lot to swallow, Ms. Yekeson. You know, she has conducted environmental and social impact assessment studies with various stakeholders around the world. She is currently pursuing a second master's degree. So she has a master, but she's pursuing a second master's degree at Duke University in environmental management. She holds a degree in developmental studies field from the universities of Morgan State University in the US and the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology in Ghana, West Africa. Ms. Yekeson, welcome to AfriH.
Thank you for having me.
You know, it's interesting as I read the bio and as you know, preview to our segment spoke with you, you know, just hearing your heart concerning the era of sustainability, it kind of resonated with what we want to do here, what we're trying to accomplish here through AfriH and the platform we have. So I'm glad that you honor our request to join us to discuss this era of sustainability in Africa. You know, I want to just start off with this on a general sense, because we know sustainability has so many sectors to it. You know, it could be sustainability in the healthcare, sustainability in technology. I mean, just so much. But we're going to just dialogue with you for now, pretty much like an overview of this whole idea of sustainability. And we're going to just dig in with you to get a view, at least so our viewers can get a view of what is sustainability. And then we're going to bring that down to the continent of Africa and see how, you know, we can impact Africa with this segment on sustainability in Africa. So talk to our audience, you know, what is sustainability? What is it?
Thank you so much. And you rightly said sustainability based on the sector that you're in, discipline. It's an issue that cuts across a lot of sectors. But I just want to give you a little bit of historical content. Sustainability, the term came about early in the 70s when you had all the industrial pollution. But most notable that you can't talk about sustainability and not relate it to, then I think was the former Norwegian prime minister. And it always refer as the Brundtland definition, and it's always also tied into our common future. So they look at sustainability, and I'll just say, sustainability is you are thinking about the future generation, so your action should not impact the future generation. So whatever you do today, you have to say, will my child or will my siblings needs be met 20 years from now? So in a layman's term, that's sustainability.
Wow, wow. It's interesting because if we're talking about sustainability, as you mentioned, we're looking at more futuristic. We're looking at more, down the road, and how the processes we start or the activities that we have going on now, how that can be preserved. You talk about longevity. We talk about longevity. How does sustainability in the overview now, again, we're not dealing with any specific sector of sustainability, but how can sustainability in an overview sense, how can it impact development and progress within the confines of a nation?
Well, we have to be mindful because some of the issues are cross-sector issues. So, and when you look at the issues of environment, it's complicated. It's numerous problems, and it can be climate change. Right now, it's climate change because climate change can impact. Let's say many years ago, the Quebec fire impacted people around the coast. Let's say in Africa, since that's our focus for this discussion, you have the sub-Saharan Africa wind, during December that cuts across even in Europe and other places. So, but you can't have one fits everything. So to answer your question, we have to look at those issues that are present. So for Africa, it's always extreme poverty. So if you allow me, let's just go back to former UN Secretary Kofi Annan. He talked about poverty in a way that is so important, but looking at it from the agro sector, that we grow so much food, but yet we input almost 35 billion worth of food that comes into the African market. So when we look at sustainability from that sense, then you say, well, how can we address? But then you have the issue of climate change. And who suffer from climate change issues when they impact food security? There are small scale farmers, and you have the issues of drought. So based on, and this is where agencies and different countries, we have almost 48 countries in in Africa as a whole. So we have to prioritize. And that's where the needs assessment come in. And that's why I'm so passionate what I do, because you have to understand what the impacts would be. And then we have to prioritize the impact based on your geographical location.
To talk to our audience, quickly about some projects you've worked on, because again, with your passion in sustainability, I understand you serve, in different countries in Africa and in different countries around the world. Can you give us a gist about some of the things that you've done, as you serve and address those issues of sustainability?
One thing I'm always passionate about is working how we all collaborate, because I think that's something missing in trying to solve all these challenging problems. And we talk about the definitions of sustainability. That started 1983, but prior to that, then you have the Paris Agreement, which was like 5 years ago, 2020, reached that 5 years threshold. And now if everyone knew recently, 2021, you have the Glasgow COP26. So it's a work in process, but it's everyone is coming on board and understand that climate change is real, and we all have to. But most of the work that I've done, it's actually, I'm a life learner. We don't have the answers. I don't have all the tools. So that's why I went back to have that space where we can all collaborate. But some of the issues, and we'll talk about energy transition, which is so important. We have endowment of renewable energy, but we are not tapping into it. We're more tapping into the non-renewable sector, which is coal, natural gas, fossil fuel, and those actually have a greater impact on the environment. So to answer your question, one example, I just got back from Colombia because I was interested in energy transition, where you have a lot of mining companies have actually closed or will be closing because they are non-renewable, they're temporary resources. So to go back to Africa, where I'll go back to Liberia. I had the opportunity of working with ArcelorMittal. Now you have bum mines, you had Lamco, all those mining companies closed, but the land were dead, and there were no restoration, to kind of correct the problem. But even how do you be proactive and have a decommissioning plan that, hey, let's do forest restoration. Let's make sure that people living around those communities, living around those areas, their waters are not being polluted. So there's so much to be done, but there's still hope. And when I said there's hope, their country right now, just based on the COP2 agreement, that some of them have recommitted. Some countries like I think Burkina Faso, Ghana is also doing well. Mozambique, that have a lot of resources, but still there are a lot of challenges with the CO2 process. One of the big things that I'm hopeful that just little actions is not only the government, but you, myself, and everyone can just take little actions. Let's say if you go to the market in Africa, right? We can start with the market. We have what? A lot of our waste is not plastic per se. So sometimes let's just put like composting, something as composting, like with the potato greens, or if you have, vegetables waste, you take that and use it as fertilizer in the garden. So, but it comes again with collaborations and having everyone involved.
Wow, 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 this is amazing. I want now to, let's look at the world as a whole, all right? Let's kind of broaden our perspective here a little bit. From your knowledge, skill, and from your expertise, how does Africa compare to the rest of the world when it comes to the whole idea of sustainability? Now, again, this is a generous, sustainability we're talking about, not necessarily a specific healthcare or, technology, but just in general. From your knowledge, how does Africa compare with the rest of the world? I mean, on a scale from 1 to 10, 1 is the lowest, 10 is the highest, well, where's the pendulum swinging, when it comes to sustainability, Africa compared to the rest of our world?
Well, I would just say that even looking at sub-Saharan Africa, it would be unfair if I just aggregate and say 1 to 10. If it's based on country specific, and then I will also, but let me just give you on Africa, compare just maybe some statistics. I love the numbers. Right now where we stand, okay, with all the countries that are in Africa, some are doing fairly well. If you take countries like Ghana, I think in another country, Rwanda, those countries are failing very well. But then if you take other countries like Liberia, you would call them fragile countries. Or the countries also that are emerging out of the civil conflict. Those countries have their unique situation. And with the climate change issues or even sustainability, some of those countries will not be able to achieve a lot of these. But I always believe that we still have to work and still build those systems and build good governance systems, and even also be transparent. But one thing I want to say, we all have the human capacity. The youth will be the one to drive, the younger generation will be the one to really drive this change. And as you can see, the youth are powerful. So we have to start looking at how to retool. So to go back to your question, how do I compare? Even in the Western countries, some countries are doing fairly well than others. But we in Africa, we still have pretty much a lot of work to do. But we can learn from places like Ghana. We can learn from places like Mozambique. We can also learn from places like Rwanda, best practices, and then feed that into our governance system.
One of the questions coming in here, has to do with education, and the question is that, who would be responsible, and I think, I mean, you kind of alluded to it, for educating the citizens on this viable solution. How can we go about, providing education towards people? Because, the fact that we are on the lower end of the spectrum tells me that people don't know a lot. People don't know a lot, obviously, and so that's why they're not applying these things, or they know and they just willfully don't want to do it. So in terms of education, how can we approach this whole idea of education? Because, and that brings me even to the next question here about advising African leaders and African governments, how to address sustainability issues. So how can we go about this thing? Because that will shape public policy. The more, the more they are informed, the more knowledge they get on this issue, it's going to impact, policies. So how can we go about, educating them, and again, I mean, you just already talked about the youth, but maybe you can just piggyback to that, and build on from there, providing education.
Thank you so much. That's a good question, Doc. One of the things is we can even start looking at the curriculums in school and start maybe looking at environmental curriculum, and start from there. You can even start things like having environmental ambassadors in communities, have the kids. It can be also, Ghana have national service. So we have to go back and look at what other countries are doing in Africa and use those best practices and build framework. But just looking at the curriculums in our schools and start incorporating that, I think that would be a good start. But not saying there are other schools that are doing those things, and kids are planting trees, and kids are, doing the neighborhood cleaning up. But again, it's not every other, country that is doing that. And then your final question goes back to what can African leaders do?
Yes.
There are doing, a lot of other countries are working, but my concern is actually how do you bring countries that have been in post-conflict, emerging countries, fragility, from conflict, they would not, you have this vision of 2050, 2030, and you're emerging other conflict. There's no way that you're gonna achieve those benchmarks. But not saying that there's still hope that you can still do small actions. It's not always the big actions. So let's say you have five schools. Let's start with 5 schools. 5 schools says we're going to start teaching environmental education. And out of those 5 schools, right, you have maybe 400 students. So you have to look at the multiplier effect on that. But as leaders in Africa, they're doing a lot of work, and I keep going back, but just strengthening the environmental governance system. And also one of the things that through my research that I know, there are a lot of ethics issues, just the implementation of a lot of these programs. And the word is going to environmental and social governance and reporting. So we have to build these systems. We have to build these strong system and collaboration.
It's amazing how time flies when we're doing these segments. But our goal here at AfriEdge is to have these what I call PowerPoint segments, where we just hit the nail on the head, as it were. I want to talk a little bit before we conclude tonight. I want to talk a little bit about your background, because as I look at your resume, 20+ year career, and then it says that you led and coordinated the development of the Washington County U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, our ozone early action company. What is that? What does that entail? This environmental agency program in Washington County concerning the ozone.
Well, when I first started my career, I started as an air quality specialist, because we said that environmental issues are very broad. So I started by that. The ozone, as you all know, it plays when the chemical reactions from different things. But what is so important, I was passionate, is the health impact of people, breathing bad air, whether it's the air from the Quebec fire. But my job was to make sure that we did an early action compact, you did an early commitment. Just like what happened last month at Glasgow, COP26, but more likely it's on like the air quality side. But also impacts is very, very severe, especially for the vulnerable population. And working with one of the teams, it was a beautiful just to make sure that people committed to early action, and it works. So that's where that commitment comes into play. If you're in Nigeria or you in Mozambique or Lesotho, and you say, you know what, we're going to adapt a national adaptation plan for climate change, and we all will do our part. Collectively, it all adds up.
Wow, wow. I got another question here for you. Environmental regulations remain a critical issue. And one of our participants is saying, what can governments at all levels do to respond to this drawback effectively? The whole idea of environmental regulations, is a major issue in Africa. So what advice would you give, or what knowledge skill would you give in terms of government at all levels, how they can do to respond to this?
That's a beautiful question, but working on environmental issues are very complicated. It's not one size fits all. This is where you need collaboration, you need transparency, and you really need good data, because you have the science and you have good data. But Africa, these countries also have to look at the technology and the technical capability. But engagement is important when you're working with all these different stakeholders, and they have to have the ethical, just the ethical values in addressing most of the problem, but especially engaging and bringing everyone at the table to have a voice. That includes the communities, including the traditional stakeholders. All those players matters to be on the table.
And in fact, that's a key thing. I was just looking at one of another part of this question that came forth about enforcement of these regulations. It's tough. It's tough in Africa to enforce things. But we need to start doing that. I'm sure you agree with me. We need to start enforcement. I think just looking at it at face value, we can dissect, and that one of the main problems we have is about enforcement or implementation. So again, speak to the African leaders, speak to African governments, speak to policymakers in Africa. Give them a word of wisdom here about the significance of enforcement and implementations of these sustainabilities regulations that we have on the books.
Well, I'll give you one example. It's their leaders are working and they're doing their beautiful initiatives out there. When I was going to school in Ghana, there was this agreement, the Bamako Convention, where international organizations or ships were dumping hazardous chemical in our water body. And the Bamako Convention came. So that's something that African leaders came about. You have ECOWAS. ECOWAS is doing another beautiful example. The National Adaptation Plan. Okay, that's a perfect example where they decided to use countries who are already doing well, like Nigeria, Mauritius, and Lesotho, trying to give them technology and establish planning baseline to help them meet their climate goals. So if we can all just continue working together, and you rightly said, implementation and enforcement, but how can you enforce when you do not have your framework and system in place? You also have to train. Training plays a very important. we all have to also have continuous training. Right now, you have to retool. We talk about the youth, but there are a lot of people now have to be able to go back and you build the capacity to enforce. In Colombia, South America, the police, actually, they have a police unit that they call an environmental police. And I'm like, oh, that is so cool. But in African countries, the police are not environmental enforcer. So that's a perfect example that, I would say, they can also look into, because police are enforcer. So maybe create something like, like, hey, the police can actually enforce to you. But having that sound ecosystem management in place is important. As I said, there are a lot of countries who are doing very well, but we also have to focus on emerging countries that come from civil conflict that they're still struggling, and not everyone might be able to achieve the target goal for 2030.
Wow. Well, it's every good thing must come to an end. It's amazing. Miss Beverly, we definitely going to have you back, because your expertise in the area is vast, over 20 years. So we have a lot more to tell us, in the allotted time that we have. But we want to express our appreciation to you, and our thanks that you afford us this time to come and just speak to the issues that are significant to Africa. Before we wrap it up, is there any concluding thought you would have to just share with our audience, and with maybe African leaders, whoever will be watching this screen? Any thought on the whole idea of sustainability, and why is it important for us to pay attention to?
Well, climate issues are here. And I will always go back to Kofi, the former UN Secretary General Kofi Annan. Africa spends so much every year to import food, billions of dollars. We have to look at the issues of poverty. Yes, we're doing a lot to address that. But also there are still a lot of challenges when it comes to the lack of food sustainability, as well as access to energy, clean energy. How do we transition? We need to start looking at renewable and tapping into the renewable energy. We have abundance of sun and wind. But however, best practices from the studies right now that they're actually looking on adaptability of climate readiness for these countries. It will always be good to have more research and just have also good governance structure, that you just start sharing.
Wow. Thank you so much. I will tell you that all our audience, members, participants here really share the same sentiment, that we are grateful for your expertise and your knowledge in this era. Obviously, we're going to have you back. There's more to cover. Folks, we want to thank you all again for tuning into AfriH. Again, we are Africans for the Restoration of Ethics in Government. We pretty much help government do the right thing. That's what ethics is all about, helping government do the right thing. And as we heard from Ms. Yekeson, sustainability is something that is very significant, that we cannot ignore. The world is leaving us behind. We got to catch up. We have so much resources in Africa that can be utilized, that we can build systems, as you mentioned, building systems that will improve the living conditions and the longevity, the mortality of our people, pretty much. But it all starts with building those systems, and also, as was mentioned, the enforcement, implementation of those systems, so that we can have the capacity that our people can benefit, and our continent can benefit from all the resources and all the different programs that we have available to them. So thank you again, Ms. Yekeson, for being with us. Thank you all for joining us. And as we always conclude AfriH with our motto, doing better by doing right. Africa can do better if she simply That's right. God bless you all, everybody. See you next time on AfriAge. Have a good night.
Thank you.